to Midnight Futurist, a quiet space where we wander gently forward into futures that might be, could be, and sometimes already are. Here, we don't race toward tomorrow, we drift, we listen, we imagine tonight's journey takes us to Mars. But not the Mars of rockets and red dust, not the colonization headlines, not the neon settlements you've seen in documentaries. This is Mars 2144, a place both more ordinary and more surreal than we ever expected. It's morning, but not the sudden light snap of an alarm, not the chirp of birds or buzz of an earthbound fridge. It's Mars morning, then light, like diluted gold slipping softly through filtered dome glass, a hush that isn't silence, but absence, no leaves to rustle, no waves to crash, only the slow tick of internal air pumps and the distant hum of communal circulation ducts. You lie in a recessed sleep basin shaped like a pod but lined with soft thermal. The basin has no screens, no news feed, no stimulation, only a subtle aroma cedar oxygen blend, calibrated to gently wake the autonomic nervous system without triggering alertness. Your mind feels slow, that's intentional. Mars mornings begin with cognitive sync delay, a state-mandated pause before full consciousness, to minimize spontaneous daydreaming. For the first 10 minutes after waking, your neural translator is muted. You can think, you can feel, but you cannot externalize. It's safer that way. The walls of your pod remain inert. No texture change, no ambient music. The expression layer, the surface that would normally light up with your projected mood, is locked by regulation until 7:14 MCT. You have 7 minutes, you stand. The gravity is familiar now. 38% of Earth's pull, enough to ground you, but still light enough that your gestures feel dreamlike, almost exaggerated. You walk to the alcove where your hydration ritual begins. A ceramic cup waits. You choose one of 3 allowed infusion streams: mint, neutral, or citrus. Nothing mood-altering, nothing nostalgic. Nostalgia, too, has been regulated. You sip slowly. A recorded message plays softly near your ear. Today's dream quotient is 0. Thank you for protecting the mesh. You nod instinctively. You've been trained not to speak aloud, yet not until after verbal clearance window. One begins at 7:22. It's not that speaking is illegal. It's that unconscious ideation is contagious, and Mars doesn't yet have the emotional capacity to absorb free-range inspiration. You slide into your morning uniform. It's warm, fitted, made of psychofluid fabric that reads micro-expressions from your muscles and skin. If you smile too long, the material logs it. If you frown sharply, it notifies your apartment's sentiment filter. These logs are not used to punish, only to stabilize. Everyone contributes to the emotional hygiene of the colony. You exit your pod. Outside in the corridor, others move quietly. There are no good mornings, no idle chatter, only a gentle bow of the head, a gloved palm to just a greeting that acknowledges presence, but protects inner life. The corridor air carries faint lavender, a communal soothing blend. Deployed colony-wide after last week's reported spike in restlessness, you walk past the train reclamation unit, a sealed box like a drop-off post. Residents who experienced unauthorized mental projections overnight can submit a written dream, sealed, private, archived. It is not read, it is neutralized. You wonder how many of these dreams were beautiful, how many were terrifying, how many were just human. But you cannot ask. The day has begun, dreaming is over, and Mars continues bright, fragile, and fiercely alert. By now, Mars is home to over 300,000 humans. It has cities, it has traffic, it has laws, and among the most quietly controversial of these laws is Article 7.2, one of the Red Territory, a chord which forbids public dreaming, not dreaming in the literal, cycle sense, but dreaming out loud, dreaming in front of others, dreaming with your eyes open where someone else might hear it. You see, in 2144, Mars is a mental commons. Every thought, wish, or vision you externalize, whether through words, sketches, even unconscious gestures, is part of a shared atmospheric data mesh. That mesh records emotion, tracks intention, distributes dream residues into the public mood field. And it turns out, dreams are dangerous things. They spread, they tangle, they infect optimism where it isn't structurally budgeted. They cause unrest where silence is required. On Earth, we call dreaming a human right. On Mars, it's unregulated energy. And so, like fire or electricity before it, dreaming had to be licensed, contained, and finally removed from public space. But how did we get here? And what does a day feel like on a planet where dreaming has been privatized? Let's begin our walk slowly, quietly into Mars 2144. As always, you don't need to do anything. Just breathe and follow the thread. To understand how dreaming became a regulated act, we must first understand the mind that built the net it now rests upon. Ilan Reyes, not a founder, not a politician, not even, technically, a scientist. She was a librarian, or at least that's how she described herself in interviews. Back before the Red Accord was passed, her specialty wasn't books, but mental archives, the storage and retrieval of collective emotion. Born in the floating city of Recife on Earth, Ilan came of age during what we now call the feedback crisis. It was a quiet, chaotic time and era where AI-driven mood environments tried too hard to please, where sentiment-matching software began creating synthetic consensus, cities where everyone smiled but no one quite knew why. Ilan was fascinated, not by the machines, but by them as far as the failed moments, the emotions that couldn't be contained. She once wrote, "What scares me is not sadness, it's joy that loops, happiness with no origin." At age 29, she declined a prestigious neurodesign post on Luna Base, and instead boarded the red relocation line to Mars, a journey that, at the time, was still considered brave, even reckless. Mars in 2098 was lawless in the emotional sense. The settlements were ragged, the mental mesh unfiltered, every thought whispered in a corridor echoed through the environmental control system. There were no boundaries between internal desire and external consequence. In those early years, settlers reported mood storms, sudden atmospheric shifts in scent, pressure, and color caused not by weather but by overlapping cognitive emissions. One person mourning a lost friend could darken an entire transit tunnel. A single child's imagination could set a school dome flickering with phantom creatures. Mars was alive with dreams and dangerously unstable. Enter Ilan Reyes. She proposed something radical, a system not to suppress dreams but to contain them, to thread them through an atmospheric neural lattice, a kind of planetary subconscious. She called it the mesh. The idea was deceptively simple. Let people think, let them dream, but direct those dreams into private resonance-filled, small, invisible pockets of emotion tethered only to their originators. Dreams would no longer leak. They would echo safely like whispered prayers. But, of course, that's not what happened. As the mesh was implemented, something unexpected occurred. Mars grew quieter, not just acoustically, but energetically. Without ambient dream currents, the cities became stable, predictable, easier to plan. Productivity rose, conflict dropped for a while. It was celebrated, the dream compression era, a time of peace, but slowly people began reporting something else. A numbness, a hollowness, a sense that their dreams, once rich and chaotic and messy, had become small, compressed, tame. That was the paradox of Ilan's system. It worked well. Within 10 years, new legislation began to appear, first as safety guidelines, then as full statutes. Public dreaming, defined as any spontaneous ideation that could project into shared atmosphere, was banned in common areas. Schools removed creative play from morning modules. Transit hubs deployed emotive noise filters, walls that absorbed stray longing. Artists required cognitive permits to exhibit work. And Ilan, she disappeared from public view. Some say she withdrew out of guilt. Others claim she continued to refine the mesh from an orbital observatory near Phobos. A few believe she regretted nothing, that she saw the mesh not as a cage but as discipline. Civilization, she often said, requires the editing of instinct. Not a single quote remains etched in the memory walls of the Martian archive dome. Dreams are seeds, but left untended, they become weeds. And weeds, unchecked, crack domes. Whatever her intentions, Ilan Reyes remains a contested figure, revered, feared, debated. Her invention made Mars livable. But in doing so, it asked a question Earth had never dared to confront. What happens when we can no longer afford unfiltered hope? And perhaps more quietly, what do we lose when the air no longer carries our dreams? Some call them mirage hollows. Others, more cautiously, refer to them as zones of cognitive instability. But to most Martian residents, they are simply known as leak zones in mapped areas. Where the mesh doesn't work, they appear without warning, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for Weeks, always somewhere new. A quiet residential hallway in the Ash Grove Dome, suddenly filled with birdsong and salt wine despite the fact that no one on Mars has seen an ocean. A child's drawing on the wall of a transit station that reshapes itself each morning, reflecting the dreams of passers-by, none of whom remember sketching it. A farm outpost where crops began to grow in spiral patterns, matching the brainwaves of a recently deceased settler. He had dreamed often and vividly of spirals. These zones defy explanation. According to planetary infrastructure reports, the mesh is fully intact. No hardware errors, no neural decay, and yet within these areas dreams manifest, unchecked, unedited, unapproved. Scientists tread lightly here. Research drones sent into leak zones often return with corrupted logs, emotive sensors misfire. Language processing modules go recursive, spitting endless poetry. Even hard-coded machinery sometimes hums quietly with recognizable lullabies. Because of this, the Mars Authority has declared all known leak zones level to containment areas. Entry is discouraged. No construction is permitted if a leak zone overlaps a living quarter. The family is offered quiet relocation, no punishment, no blame, just distance. But rumors persist. Some say the leak zones are alive remnants of early settler dreaming, so powerful and unfiltered that they fused into the soil itself. Others believe they are echoes from Earth transmitted accidentally through ancient memory. Satellites, beaming nostalgia across space in broken pulses. A few whisper that Ilan Reyes left clues inside them. But one fact remains: the leak zones do not spread. They do not multiply. They appear, they persist, and eventually they fade. And perhaps that is what makes them so haunting. In a world engineered for emotional equilibrium, these ruptures are not dangerous in the conventional sense. They do not harm or steal or scream, but they do something far more disruptive. They remind us of a time before permission, a time when longing was ambient, when fear echoed freely, when love, unlicensed, could still fill a room. Leak zones are memory made physical, and yet when you enter one, if you ever do, you feel no urgency, no fear. Just a strange weight behind your eyes, as if a story you once knew was about to return, but not in words. It comes in scent, in warmth, in color without shape. You reach for it, but your fingers pass through, and you understand why the laws were made. Not because dreams are evil, but because they're contagious. And once someone remembers how to dream in public, they rarely go back to silence, even if the silence is safer. There is a place not found on standard Mars Authority maps where the mesh no longer hums. No ambient mood filters, no dream regulation towers, cognitive lag imposed by citywide sync delays. Just wind, Martian dust, and breath. It's called Eres Station. Though station is a generous term, it began as a mining outpost abandoned after the water bedded sat on ran dry. For nearly 20 years, it was forgotten until the dreamers arrived. No one calls them that officially. The Mars Authority refers to them as outmesh anomalous populations, but to each other, they're simply free walkers. There are only about 300 of them. Former artists, philosophers, mental health workers who once curated dream logs. Children born into the system who one day refused to renew their emotional citizenship licenses. They came for different reasons, but they stayed for one. To remember what it feels like to think without being watched, even by a system designed to protect. In Eres Station, you don't need verbal clearance to speak. No expression walls log your posture. No mood scent is piped into the air. Residents have rewired the old ventilation units to disperse whatever fragrances they choose. Often it's natural, dried herbs from their garden domes. A tincture of Martian moss soaked in sunstone water. Even Earth-imported cinnamon sticks when they can afford it. Each scent tells a story. Each scent is permission given freely. Their homes are simple, built from old mining modules and broken transport parts. Repurposed into cozy dens lined with hand-woven fabrics and old books. There are no display panels, no emotional dashboards, just texture, color, real heat from real friction, and perhaps most importantly, there are stories spoken aloud. At night, they gather in a central dome nicknamed the Echo Chamber, not to worship, not to debate, but to dream. Together, they tell their dreams the way one might read ancient scripture, with reverence but without interpretation. No dream is questioned, no dream is solved. It is simply shared. Some dreams are mundane, a remembered bicycle from childhood, a house with infinite windows. Some are impossible. A city made of feathers, a language spoken entirely in tides, and some are warnings of systems to quiet, of peace to perfect. Children born in Eres Station are taught 3 skills before anything else: how to build a wall from Martian clay, how to identify edible roots, how to tell a dream without fear. Because here, the dream is not a resource. It is not a hazard. It is home. Life is harder in ears. Food supplies are limited. Medical technology is primitive. Emotional instability, especially in newcomers, is common. But when asked if they would return to the regulated zones, most residents simply smile, and one of the elders, a former compliance officer from the Novo Viaduct settlement, once said, "I'd rather cry honestly in red dust than smile politely in golden light." Eres is not a utopia, but it is a memory of what life felt like before every breath had to be balanced and every thought had to fit inside someone else's system. In a world where silence is law, Eres dares to whisper, and sometimes on particularly still nights that whisper escapes the dome, carried by wind across the open basin. Some say that's how the leak zones form. Not from error, not from failure, but from the quiet, defiant dreaming of places like this. As we drift gently back toward the breeze and toward the softness of your roam, the stillness of your own breath Mars begins to fade. The dust settles, the silence resumes, and the question lingers: what is a dream when it cannot be shared? On Earth, we often speak of dreams as fuel. We tell children to follow them. We build industries on the belief that they are sacred, wild, burning, necessary. But in places like Mars 2144, where every emotional fluctuation is a variable, a risk, a potential rupture in shared stability, dreams had to be tamed, measured, redirected. While the mesh made life possible, it also imposed a new kind of quiet, one not born of peace but of preservation. It is easy from this distance to mourn that loss, to romanticize the free walkers of Eres Station, to imagine ourselves resisting, remembering, reaching. But perhaps tonight, there is a simpler truth to hold, that dreams and like data or error are not so easily erased. They wait patiently, silently, at the edge of routine, in leak zones, in untended gardens, in whispered poems etched on station walls, and maybe here too in your room. Wherever you are, there is a leak zone, a small, invisible place in your life where no regulation lives, where no system watches, where longing doesn't need to be useful to be real. So tonight, you are invited not to resist, not to rebel, but simply to remember the texture of your own thoughts, the sound of an imagined tide, the face of someone you have never met but see often when you close your eyes. This is not rebellion. This is not nostalgia. This is dreaming, freely, quietly, together for just a moment. And when you wake, if you remember anything at all, let it be this: that no matter the year, no matter the law, no matter the weight of the air, your dreams belong to you. Thank you for joining us tonight. This has been Midnight Futurist. Sleep well and drift onward.